I mentioned that you work for a SETA, it somehow creates an expectation that there's going to be funding flowing to those in attendance. So I am going to disappoint you. I did not bring a checkbook or a wallet or a credit card for that matter. So there's not going to be any funding flowing. Hopefully, at the end of this presentation, you will most probably give me some money, and I promise you it will be well spent. Thank you for the opportunity to address yourselves, and thank you for taking time out to be here this afternoon. I see some familiar faces also from my office, and I'm quite sure they here to check up on me to make sure that I did do some work today. Now one of the things that I believe is that most companies, if not all, will attest to the fact that the most important resource within the organizations are the employees. I would want to believe so. Some refer to it as the bloodstream of the organization, particularly in a country like ours, which is highly labor intensive. In our engagement with stakeholders in the manufacturing and engineering sector, many members seem to have one thing in common, and that relates to the cost of training being expensive, both in terms of money and time, including the time it takes to deal with administrative issues. In fact, some organizations or some employers will tell you exactly to the cent what they spend on the employees. Based on the above, it is evident that a substantial number of companies are not engaging in training and development of their current workforce because they see it is too expensive. But I think the question that one needs to ask, and I hope that you will ask that question to yourself, do we really know what the cost is to those organizations that do not invest in training of their workforce? And I want you to hear emphasis. I'm not talking about the cost, I'm talking about the investment. Historically, we know that the country, particularly our SOEs, the ESCOMs, Transnets of the world, trained groups of workers, particularly artisans, to address their own needs, and sometimes also they train a little more to address the needs of others. The skills development system, through the skills development legislation, as well as the national skills development strategies, was supposed to build on this and accelerate in a coordinated way the training within all. Okay. To compound the situation, we now find ourselves at a juncture where new technologies are on the horizon. The previous speaker referred to Industry 4.0. For some and for others. For others, this technology is already being implemented, particularly within the OEMs, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, VW. They've already embarked on using this new technology. This requires a component manufacturer. The auto sector also plans to significantly increase their local content. Now, if you walk about here, you will see there's a number in actual fact, there's one section that seems to be dedicated to the Chinese market. And if you look at those products, they are all components that we are importing. And there is a plan from the auto sector to significantly increase their local content. I think it's from somewhere around between 15 and 25%. They want to increase it to 60%. And this, of course, will require components manufacturing industry that will have to be competitive with current global suppliers for these components. Now, if we have a components manufacturer of alternators as an example, there's quite a few presenting their products from China. So this company will have to be competitive with the likes of these organizations. And if you look at Chinese companies, the kind of technology that they use is well advanced in terms of Industry 4.0. Now this, if we embark on this process, will require the adoption of new technologies with the accompanied skill sets. The sad reality from research done by merSETA and also within our sector skills plan over the past 5 years suggests that industries is not training as many artisans as required. The NSDP has set a target of 30,000 artisans per annum, and it is going to be extremely difficult for us to reach that target, let alone the reskilling and upskilling of the current workforce. The research also suggests an increasing demand for higher skills with specific demand at the levels of technicians, professionals and managers, which are increasing over time to meet current needs, not even future needs, just our current needs. What surprises me is that when South Africa was isolated, we produced and invested significantly more in training for our then current and future workforce. The dawn of our democracy opened and allowed us to operate within the global market, yet our investment in training slowed down, as is evident in the decrease in the numbers of skilled people produced. An analysis from the merSETA database indicates that from the 23,000 companies, and those are companies that operate within this subsector, there are about 4,200 companies that contribute to the levies from the 23,000. And there's about 8,000, let's say 9,000 companies that participate in training initiative through the levy system. So one wonders, if you take 8,000 from 23, where's the rest of those companies? We can understand when stakeholders lament the loss of trained workers to their competitors who offer marginally higher salaries, but to quote Henry Ford, the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them at all and having them stay. So you have a choice. Are you going to train them and let them leave, or are you not going to train them and have them around you? Choice is yours. An organization's ability to train and rapidly assimilate training into productivity gives the company the ultimate competitive advantage, while at the same time caters for the career aspirations of its workforce. I recently, not so long ago, had to take a car in that was involved in an accident, and I took it to one of our repair shops. And this repair shop, what was interesting to me is one that has been accredited by a number of OEMs. So it must be, by virtue of being accredited, a good repair shop. Now, while waiting, when we went to collect the car, I engaged the owner, being a loyal merSETA servant and to my staff. It was on a Saturday, so I work on Saturdays as well. So I marketed our services to this particular owner of the business. And I wanted to know from him, are you training any of your staff or any unemployed people? And the answer was no. And I probed because I want to understand, but do you pay skills levies? He says yes. And I said to him, but so you're not benefiting from the skills levy? And the response was one that seemed to suggest this is an administrative function and we don't have time. So when the car was presented to me, I had a look at the car and did some inspection. I found a defect on the car. And I showed him the defect, and of course, there was no quibble about it. I had to take the car back the next week for it to be repaired. And as Murphy's Law would have it, the same car, most probably 3 months. Now, you might be starting to think that this old God is licensed somewhere in Mpumalanga at some stage. It wasn't my car, it was my wife's car. So the insurance then referred us back to the same auto body repairer. And once again, when we went to collect the car, there was another defect. And of course, once again, the company was more than willing to fix it. But what was interesting is that on a Saturday, I'm quite sure they came to do specific work. They spent most probably 2 hours on my car trying to fix it because I made it clear I am not coming back. What stood out for me was the service. The service was good. There was no issue, no quibble. They repaired it. But then I started to wonder, do you realize the cost that you have incurred? Because it's additional cost. And if that happens with every second one of your clients, can you just begin to imagine the cost that might be built up for this particular organization? And it's quite clear that no consideration whatsoever has been given to the extent of that cost over a period of time. Another example is our national electricity regulator or supplier. I hope the light is not going to go off now. Where previously, now I used to work for ACEO, and the number of people then produced more electricity per megawatt than the current cohort of employees, which is slightly doubled. And the minister himself, after all the changes to ESCOM, acknowledged that there's a skills deficit. So you can understand that if there's a skills deficit, you need more to do less. Amazingly, if you walk down to all 7 and all 8, you would see those beautiful trucks and buses. And a transport company, and maybe one of you are here who's decided to come and spend your well-earned millions, will buy this truck for 2 to 3 million, and they will see it as a huge investment. In actual fact, it is a huge investment. But when the same company has to take his driver on a defensive driving course, which will cost him most probably 10,000 rand, will see this as a huge cost. Now, I don't understand, you trust this driver whom you don't want to train with your 2 to 3 million investment, and when you have to train him, you see this as a huge training cost. Now, I'm not surprised by the results. I am not, to be quite honest with you, because one of our board members, Dr. Alex Mashilo, has conducted some research within 2 of our subsectors. And what comes out is quite interesting. In the sector where you had a high investment in skills development, for some reason the productivity went up and their staff complement came down. So they were able to do more, produce more with less staff. On the other side, we had a subsector that did not invest as they should in training, and once again the results were opposite. Production came down and the staff complement increased. And if one begins to quantify that in real monetary value, I promise you we're going to have serious challenges of being competitive. A 2012 report found that high-impact learning organizations experience profit growth 3 times greater than organizations that lack a learning management strategy. This suggests that learning organizations will outperform their rivals and may even close them down. I trust that by now you have made you're a business owner, some calculations around the loss in profit. See, I can't say to you the loss in money. I must use your language, profit. The loss in profit due to, amongst others, wastage resulting from avoidable mistakes, reworks, something that I had experienced, the reputational harm or damage to the organization. Honestly, if I have to pay for a car that I need to fix, I'm not going to go back to the same one that the insurance has referred me to. There's an issue of low productivity. There's also an issue of staff turnover, because people want to work for organizations that has an interest in their well-being as well as their development. And of course, if you have to, on a continuous basis, renew your staff, the cost that relates to recruitment, and these things are sometimes not taken into consideration. Increased stress levels of your staff, as well as low staff morale. Now, we need to find a way to quantify that in monetary terms, and you will be surprised as to the loss that you are incurring as a result of not training. Now, it's my view that any training that contribute to increase profitability cannot and must not be seen as a cost. You can't see that as a cost. In the same way that you invest in this 2 to 3 million truck and see it as an investment, if your staff contributes to that profitability, they cannot be seen as a cost. They must be seen because they're an important asset. They are the bloodline of your organization. They are an investment. What surprises me when we normally go through a dip in the economy and there's an opportunity for cuts, the first one is going to be the training budget. Am I right? The first one that's going to be cut is the training budget, because we have seen it as a cost and not an investment. You're not going to sell the truck because the truck is an investment, but you most certainly are going to cut down on your training cost because it is seen as an operational cost. Training of employees is an investment and must be treated as such. Most research indicates the positive impact training has not only on productivity but also staff loyalty, retention and commitment. In our attempt to entice more companies to engage in training for the current as well as future needs, merSETA partnered with RMI and fund a development tool, a return on investment development tool, to assist organizations in their decision making regarding training. I must say this particular tool deals with the return on investment of artisans. What is interesting about this tool, and I must also say, as much as we have developed the tool was tested with companies. And what's interesting from the outcomes of the tool is that the tool seemed to suggest that even when you train an apprentice, there's a huge return on your investment. If you train an apprentice over a 3-year period, by the 18th month you break even. And thereafter, this apprentice or this learner generates income. So you would understand why I'm saying you should be telling me how do we invest in the efforts from merSETA rather than how do I benefit from the skills levy. In another trade, which is boiler making, after a training period of 12 months, that's when you have your break even. So the next 2 years while this individual is in your factory, he is contributing to your profitability. So he can't be seen as a cost. He is one of the functions that invest within your organization. The World Economic Forum tells us that 1 in 2 people, so 50% of your staff members would need to be reskilled or upskilled within the next 3 years. And to remain relevant, a company will have to invest in its workforce. Failure to invest will eventually lead to its collapse. J.P. Landman seemed to support the notion of reskilling and upskilling. In his book, The Long View, he states, and I quote, "A society can choose against unlearning and relearning, or it can accept the often painful reality of change and go through the process. If a society chooses against change, it will destroy much in trying to control events and avoid their change," unquote. It is thus clear that a changing workplace environment requires a labor force that is more agile, innovative, self-sustaining to secure decent livelihoods. The demands of Industry 4.0 requires greater investment in today and tomorrow's workforce, greater investment in our workforce. The merSETA data has also shown over time that there are now more small, medium enterprises operating in our sector, because that's the door for job creation. It's the SMEs, the likes of BMW and wherever else are now using the latest technology, are now using automation, so they don't need as many staff as they used to. But your small and medium companies will most probably be the biggest job creators moving forward. While larger enterprises still account for 70% of all jobs, the medium and small enterprises are seen as the catalyst to create employment, and as such we need to jointly explore ways to ensure increased investment in the workforce of these SMEs. Ultimately, training is not just about skills acquisition, which should serve organizations to be competitive in the global market. We raise once again the question that begs an answer. Do we really know? Do we really know the cost of not training our workforce? Or should it be rephrased to the organizational cost associated with the lack of investment in training and developing the bloodline of the organization? The lack of investment in training adds significantly to real cost of companies. It hits the profitability of the company where it hurts most. Now I know you don't want to invest and not see a return. You don't want to pay someone a salary and not see that return. But you need to make sure that that someone is well capable to fulfill the functions you've employed him to do. Now we are aware through research of the conditions in the workforce, and we are working towards empowering learners to navigate their career in a precarious world. The merSETA has recognized the cost of not training, and is working towards circumventing those eventualities by being more responsive to the needs of the economy and the needs of the workers. It is of critical importance for companies to seriously consider the implications which over time could have dire consequences to the future of the survival of their business. Coupled with considering the cost of not training would be an analysis to the benefits gained through investing in the bloodstream of the organization. And that includes your current as well as your future workforce. And there are enormous benefits, enormous. I cited or alluded earlier to the two subsectors, where a company that invests significantly has seen an increase in production, which translates into an increase in profitability, a reduction in the number of people that is employed, which also contributes to its profitability. I thank you. I don't know if there are any questions. You're welcome to ask me. So you agree with me? Thank you.